My name is Mordecai. I've served as the chief advisor to the King of Persia, though that wasn't always my job. My first job was actually as the king's gatekeeper. Basically, I was the man that let people into the palace to see the king, or told them to get lost if he didn't want to see them. So, how exactly does the king's doorman become his chief advisor? Well, that's not actually my story. That's the story of Esther. Esther was my cousin, although there was a significant age gap. But when her parents died, when she was a baby, I was her only living relative, and so I became her foster father. Now, being even a minor official of the king could make it difficult to be a single dad sometimes, but with a lot of help from God, I raised her right. She became as beautiful on the inside as she was on the outside. And when she was full grown, something very interesting happened. Xerxes, the king of Persia, started looking for a queen. He had all of his officials going all out over the country trying to find the prettiest girls in the land. When they found someone they thought might suit the king, they brought her to the palace to have 6 months of beauty treatments, after which she would get to go on one date with the king. One chance to impressive enough to become queen. Now, when I first heard about this, and knowing that Esther was the king's type, my first instinct was to hide her. It's not that I didn't think she would be a good queen. It's just Esther and I are Jews. That means that we're not Persian. Our ancestors came from Judah, which had been conquered by Babylon, and which Persia had in turn conquered. We didn't follow the same customs and the same religions as Persia did. Now, we were tolerated in Persia, and in many ways we were pretty well looked after. Men like Daniel had served the kings of Persia very well, so we'd earned a place for ourselves in this country. But there were some people that didn't like us because we stuck to the ways of our ancestors, following the one true God, instead of adopting Persian customs. But then a thought kind of struck me. Maybe, just maybe, Esther was meant to be queen. Imagine the possibilities of having a Jew as the queen. That might offer our people some protection from the enemies that we had in this country. I talked it over with Esther, and she thought the same thing. Maybe God had provided her for such a time as this. So I took her to the palace, but we agreed that no one was to know she was a Jew or related to me. We'd save that information until a time when it was needed. But after her 6 months and her one date with the king, he picked her to be his queen. He fell in love with her after that first time. And it was a good thing, too, that God had provided a way for Esther to be in the court, because we were going to need to protect the protection that the queen could offer us, and fast. Remember how I said we had enemies in Persia? One of them happened to be the king's second in command, his chief advisor, a man named Haman. Now, the Persians had all kinds of strange laws. One of them was that the king's chief advisor was to be bowed to when he walked by. However, that would have gone against the religious laws of us Jews. So the kings of Persia had said that we Jews did not have to bow to the king's second in command. We bowed to the king and our God and nobody else. Haman hated that. And he hated us because we refused to bow to him. He hated us so much that he went to the king and convinced him that we needed to be wiped out. And the king, trusting Haman with his life, did just as Haman asked, and he wrote a law, told Haman to take care of the details, and that we Jews would be executed. When the signs were posted all around the city informing everybody of the king's decree, I knew at once what had to have happened. I mean, Haman hated all Jews, but he probably hated me the most. As the king's gatekeeper, he had to see me every day. So I was a constant reminder that we Jews would not bow to him. So I knew that Haman was doing this not just to get at my people, but probably to get specifically at me as well. And I'd say depressed would be the right word. In a way, I blamed myself for what was going to happen. So I went home, I put on sackcloth and covered myself in dust. Then I went to the city square and I mourned. At the time, I couldn't see any way out for us. But then, God intervened. Esther heard about what I was doing. She sent one of her servants to me with a change of clothes. How could I change clothes when I was in such a bad mood? I needed to get the sad out of my system. But I did realize one thing. This was our one chance to be saved. I sent the servant back with a message. I told Esther what was going on, about what Haman was doing. And I told her, maybe you were made to be queen for such a time as this. You are the one chance our people have of being saved. So Esther sent a reply through that same servant, asking me to go to all the Jews in the city and ask them to pray for her. She would pray as well, and then she would go and probably do the most dangerous thing she'd ever done in her life. She was going to go talk to her husband. Now that might seem a little silly, but remember when I said the Persians had all those strange laws? One of those laws was no one, not even the queen, could enter the king's presence without being invited. Anyone who came to see the king without him asking for them to come first could be executed on the spot. The king had to specifically pardon a person who came to see him uninvited if they were going to be saved. Esther knew she was risking her life by going to see Xerxes. And to be honest, the guy was he had mood swings, let's put it that way. But she knew she was the one chance our people had. So she prayed that God would give her courage. And she went to talk to the king. The king, he was so in love with Esther, he pardoned her instantly. And seeing that there was something on her mind, he said, "Ask me for whatever you want. I'll give you anything." And Esther said, "All I want is for you and Haman to come to a party I'm throwing tonight." Both men were ecstatic at the idea. But as the party went on that night, the king could tell there was more on Esther's mind. And so, as the party was winding down, the king went to her and said, Ask me for anything you want. Anything, and as long as it's in my power, it's yours. Esther said, all I ask is that you and Haman come to another party I'm going to throw tomorrow night. Again, both men were happy to oblige. Now, you might wonder what was going on, but Esther was waiting for the right moment. She knew she had to catch the king at just the right time. Remember, he was moody. She needed to be sure that the king would respond well to what she asked. And as the second party on the next night wound down, the king again went to her and said, I know something's on your mind, Esther. Ask me for anything, even up to half my kingdom, and it's yours. Realizing the time was finally right, Esther said to him, save me and my people, for we've been ordered to be executed. The king hears that someone is trying to hurt his queen, and he is furious. His mood swings have just kicked in full throttle. He's gone from being in a great mood to being ready to punch the first guy he sees. He's that mad. And he says to Esther, who would dare try to hurt you? And Esther says, it's Haman. He has ordered that me and my people, the Jews, be executed. I am the cousin of your gatekeeper Mordecai. Remember, he once saved your life, my king. We don't mean you any harm. Now Haman, desperate because realizing that his life is hanging by a thread here, he begs the king not to listen to her. He even begs Esther to have him spared. But the king is in no mood to listen. Someone has tried to hurt the love of his life, and he will not be... He's in no mood to hear otherwise. So he actually has Haman taken out and executed. And he orders the execution of the Jews stopped. After Esther's recommendation, and again remembering that I had at one point helped save the king's life, he promoted me to Haman's old job. And it was all because of the courage of one girl. Now that's one of the greatest lessons from Esther's story. Even when doing so is dangerous, when you ask God to give you courage to do the right thing, He will give you the courage to do so. So next time doing the right thing seems scary to you, just remember Esther. She would have been as scared as you could get going to see the king. She'd have been just as scared revealing her secret to the king that she was a Jew. But she prayed that God would give her courage. And God gave her the courage to do what was right. And He'll do the same for you.